Nope. And we are recording. Okay, so couple of quick little business things. We are having a fundraiser. Yay! It's going to start from today, and we're going to end it October 28th. It is a coffee fundraiser. So we're going to be sending out a document later in the evening, probably, and we're going to. It's going to have all the information. We would like you all to sell between 4 to 5 bags of coffee or tea. The website is thegivingbean.com. The more money that we raise during this fundraiser, the less that you'll have to spend on KMEA next year. That's because this year we're online. The incentives for the top 3 sellers, first prize will get a $25 gift card. Mm-hmm. Second prize is a $20 gift card, and third prize is a $15 gift card. These are all Visa gift cards, by the way. When the person you have sold to is going to go to pay, make sure they say your name specifically, and Tracy will be able to see this. The coffee will ship directly to the person who bought, so you don't have to worry about distribution. I think it's a good gift for people, and make sure that it's only online. So make sure that you're putting it on social media, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. I don't know what everybody has. Twitter, MySpace, go for it. But just go out and sell. Our next event after this is going to be next Friday. It's going to be mocktails. Bring food, dinner, whatever you want. I'm going to be eating during the meeting. And I do believe that is everything. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Tom.
All of these NAFME activities seem to be centered around like tea and coffee and mocktails and eating dinner. Sounds like a very acceptable organization. So first of all, I know we tried to get together and have me speak with you guys sometime last year, and it never worked out. So it's really cool to be able to speak to you guys today. I'm also painfully aware. Oh, by the way, for marching band people, I've just realized this. Today's presentation is sponsored by Dinkle's Brand Footwear. It is here and available for all of you, should you wish to have it. Anyway, I'm painfully aware that since February, we've been doing loads and loads and loads of this Zoom stuff. My disclaimer is the stuff that I talk about today is all personal opinion, garnered from experience, it's not being overly enthusiastic towards one point of view or not being overly critical of another. What I wanted to do was talk to you maybe for like half an hour, 45 minutes, and give you something practical. As NAFME is a music education organization, I want you to leave with perhaps a slightly different viewpoint from somebody who is not from this land, and then maybe have 1 or 2 additional skills that you can apply to what you do. So there's a couple of things. First of all, you'll notice in the chat, there is a file. That file is a piece of music composed by a friend of mine. He happens to be a friend, but also he's a really great composer, and this piece of his illustrates what I'm going to talk to you about today pretty well. So download that, and if you wouldn't mind deleting it after you've checked it out, that would be awesome. And yeah, the other thing is we're going to listen to a piece of music, and I'm going to ask you a couple of really, really silly questions. So you can either respond with like the thumbs up thing, or like a thumbs up or a wave in your screen. And there's one question which I'd love to, which is like a bit of an experiment, that I'd love you to actually unmute or write a response to. So the thing that I thought we talk to you about today is music, the actual music that we play, whether it's from like middle school and high school level, collegiate level, or like professional level and community band, anything other than our beginner band books, really. Now, most of you, I reckon, know me from marching band, or more accurately last year from the guy who was trying to learn what marching band is. And some of you will know me from wind ensemble or conducting class. But what you may not know is that I have a career away from KU. And it's part of the reason why I was away for so long last year. I write music. That's kind of about 60% of what I do. And I'm pretty fortunate that names that you might recognize have played that music. So the people that you may be familiar with are the President's Own US Marine Band, the US Air Force Band, the West Point Band, and bands in lots of different countries like the Far East, Australia, Europe. That's not a clang, and it's not really an introduction because this session isn't about me. What I'm saying and saying it is I've had the opportunity to see the way music education works in a lot of different places, and the differences I feel are actually pretty staggering. If we were to think about just the differences between the UK and the USA, for example, can everybody hear me okay? Seems to have gone very quiet. Awesome. Good times. Um, the differences between music ed in the UK and the UK are absolutely staggering. For example, one of the things that I'm constantly amazed at here at KU is that there is a whole music education degree program where you have to learn each other's instruments and have this very considered, broad and yet deep knowledge of everybody's activity as an instrumentalist. And you're being taught that from an undergraduate level. We don't get that in the UK, and we don't get that in many places in Europe either. It's a little bit like it in Germany. But what we have is you would go into your undergraduate degree as whatever you are, a performer, a composer, a musicologist, and there are specialist places that you go to do that. Conservatoires for performers, and then typically universities for academics and composers. And then when you want to teach, um, you go and do like a top-up degree afterwards, a 1 year teaching conversion as your master's. So first of all, the way other countries teach their teachers is very, very different to the way you do it here. The other thing that's different is the way you start to learn, particularly in bands. And let me just open you up to a gallery view here. Can you throw me a thumbs up if you're a band person? So I can see if we've got any string folks. Predominantly band people. Okay. Sorry, string folks. I do band, and that is what I'm going to be talking about, and choir folks too. But what we get to will hopefully be applicable to you guys too in a broader sense. But band is obviously a class for you guys, right? And in your classes like band clinic, you're learning to differentiate and teach people different instrumental skills, brass, woodwind, and percussion at the same time through multiple sittings during a week, like 2 or 3 band rehearsals during a week. We don't have any of that in the UK or Europe. It's usually a one-to-one situation whereby you will have a teacher from outside the school system, usually a private company, who will come in and spend half an hour with a student a week on a one-to-one basis, building instrumental capability. And then any ensembles that happen will happen kind of outside of curricular time. So in your dinner break during school, after school time. I can remember when I was like 12 to 16, I would go to school until 4 o'clock, and then I was there until about 7:30 every night doing a different choir, orchestra, or band, because ensembles are facilitated in that way. Our classroom lessons are more like music appreciation, I guess. Very little practical involved. So the cultures are massively different. But there is one thing that I think is the same in every country that I've been to. And that is whether it's being played by a collegiate or professional level ensemble, or whether it's being played by the level of ensemble that it's intended for. First of all, if I were to say grade 2, grade 3 band music to you, do you all know what that means? Great, the grade system of music rather than what grade it is in school, right? It's really difficult to find good grade 2 to 4 music that is a great educational tool. So it's composed well and it's artistically valid. So it has like a uniqueness about it. It has a unique aesthetic about it. It's interesting in sound. Maybe it has some kind of extra musical narrative as well as being fun to play. So here's the question that I want to ask, and I hope somebody will answer it. Who remembers in particular, and this could be where the whole crux of my conversation with you goes completely wrong and somebody just completely undoes everything that I'm about to say. Who remembers a piece that they just played in their high school band and has like a really positive memory of it? Anybody? Unmute and just share with us if you did and what it was. Somebody's got to do it, or I'm going to make
Stephen
Maddie do it.
Raniki's Goddess of Fire.
Great, awesome, right? Really, really cool. So it has an
Yeah.
evocative name. I don't know the piece, but straight away I can tell it has an evocative name, right? It has an exciting title, and that's one of the things that composers do nowadays is pick these evocative names to try and draw students into the music. What do you remember, Christian, about that music that has this positive connotation for you?
So I just liked all like how he was able to convey so many different moods. I don't like saying the word moods, so like I don't like throwing it around, but so many different moods in um so many unique ways. So it starts out really um, kind of almost eerie,
Hmm.
um, with like low brass and low woodwinds, and it then like there's like then it goes to like this really fast, like chaotic, like almost like you almost feel like you're going like through the depths of hell as you go through the piece, and then it ends in that same kind of beginning, like, and then you kind of leave your whatever. I'm bad at explaining it, but I just
No,
remember just really liking um, the contrast of moods, the contrast of feelings.
I'm so glad you said what you said. You said one word which I was really hoping that somebody would say. It's just that you really liked it. Okay, you really liked it, and that's the bottom line with a lot of music. Music, perhaps for grade 2 to 4 at this middle school, high school level, is composed, yes, as an educational tool, but really for people to like it. And everybody that I speak to, when we talk about like transporting yourself back to that time, they associate the music with something that they liked hearing, or something that they really liked playing, or something that excited them, or something that was challenging. But very rarely has somebody ever said to me, that piece really moved me, or that piece made me see the world in a different way, or that piece helped me understand something that someone else was going through. And this is what I wanted to talk to you about today. The idea that, first of all, there is a difference between music which is published and music which is well written from a compositional standpoint, and that's a massively useful skill to be able to identify when you're going into teaching. And a stage further, perhaps more than ever in the world that we're in right now, particularly in this country and particularly in my country right now, um, we should be taking every opportunity that we can to teach the next generation of students to not just be good uh, players and good musicians, but to be good people too, and to be good human beings, and to have empathy, and to have understanding, and to have an awareness of their surroundings. And I absolutely believe that that is something that music can do with a passion. It's a universal language that we can use to bring people together. Can we do that with pieces that are constantly overture for band, or some piece that's about an eagle and a mountain, or I'm not sure that we can. So what we're going to talk about today and what we're going to explore is the idea of um, what music is out there that can, as well as being a great educational tool, can impart these important social, cultural, historical, and lessons about community to our students, and where you can find it. Okay, that's what I wanted to speak to you about. So we're going to try and share screen for this woefully inadequate PowerPoint that I've prepared. There we go. It'll give you an idea. So the first thing, and I can't see anybody now, I've minimized my thing, so this is becoming very unnerving, that I guess we should address is, where does this kind of music for middle school and high school come from? This, shall we call it, blander music that exists, yes, to be a good educational tool, but doesn't have that artistic ethos behind it. Um, and the answer is, it all kind of comes from here. I'm going to switch you back up so I can see you for a second. Has anybody seen this chart before? Throw me a thumbs up if you have. Now, Sean has, awesome. So this is the American Band College Music Grading Chart. Now, there are different kinds of grading charts. Other grading charts are available, but there are different kinds of grading charts for every, more or less every state education organization. It's not only how they organize existing pieces into, like, you know, a grade bracket. Not only is it a tool for conductors to go and kind of see where their band is sitting in terms of ability to grade a curriculum, but this is what composers and publishers use to define and to really batten down what grade level a piece is. And as you can see, there are two areas to it. The left hand side, we're dealing with aspects of the composition, so rhythm, dynamic, articulation, ornamentation, scoring, tempo, yada 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 yada. And you can see, the further to the right in the columns that we go, the more complex we are getting, right? And on the right, we have ever expanding ranges that you can use for instruments. So the one thing that I think is interesting with this chart is This, for me, contains all of the building blocks and all of the tools that we need to teach the students so that they can become expressionate in their playing, so that they can send a message with their playing, right? It teaches contrast in note value, it teaches contrast in style, dynamic. However, not once in any of these grading charts or systems is the word expression or mood, like was said earlier, mentioned ever. It just feels like building blocks. And that to me is kind of what a lot of this music can become if we're not careful. And there is a reason for this. Okay, the reason for this is that conferences like the Midwest Clinic in particular is they are publishers events more than anything. Yes, there are lots of concerts that you can go and watch, and yes, there are master classes that you can go and watch, which are all fantastic and very worth going to. But predominantly, that event exists to sell music. That's the big reason. And what's a better sell to teachers than somebody coming up to you and saying, "Hey, I'm going to solve all your problems for you. I am going to neatly differentiate your age ranges into this nice little box. And if you just teach these grades of pieces in this order, then you are going to have a functioning band by the final year in high school that's playing to a grade 4 or a grade 5 or whatever." Okay. Um, that kind of becomes all about mechanics, okay? And it teaches us to put things together well and to be good instrumentalists, but it doesn't unlock that door into being a good musician or to being a good human being. And it's something that's very difficult to change, because if publishers and distributors aren't selling the kind of music that's going to open up our minds and open up our students' minds, what are we getting when we buy music? Well, what they're kind of doing, publishers and distributors, is acting like a little bit of a gatekeeper. Okay, and they've done it for many, many years, since Winband music has been available. So, like, around about a century now. And the way they've done it is they've been the only ones that can produce on a mass scale sheet music, going back to the times of having to physically engrave onto metal plates and print music with ink on paper, going back to times when you're using specific, very expensive industry-led software to print on a mass scale all stuff that's not available to composers. They had to be there, and they had to be the ones to produce all of this material. So therefore, they can keep their focus on the thing that's going to generate the most sales and the most revenue for them, rather than the thing that's going to potentially do the most good. So now that I've shown you this, what I would love you to do when you're looking for music is potentially completely ignore it. Okay, and I've split it down into, again, this is by no means anything official. This is just my thought process that I go through when I'm looking for music, okay, for any grade level, but particularly grades 2 to 4. I'm looking at the instrumentation and I'm thinking, is this instrumentation manageable and practical for my ensemble? Okay, that's not necessarily thinking, oh, I haven't got a great oboe, I can't use an oboe part. It's thinking, is there anything that's out of the ordinary in there? Is there a contralto clarinet? Is there a bass saxophone? Are the trumpets required to play flugelhorns? Really look at just the basic material on the page, first of all. These are all in no particular order, by the way. I just think that they're all really, really important things. Key and tonality is obviously a really, really important one that knits back to our grade level. You want your musicians to be comfortable and sound great in what they're playing, so be aware of the key and tonality of what you're looking at to make sure it's not beyond the level of your particular group. Tempo and duration, again, another really obvious idea. If you see a piece that's 20 minutes long, it's probably not going to be great for your grade 2 level ensemble. Similarly, if you've got a tempo that's very, very slow or very, very, very fast. Those are the simple ones out of this list, I guess. The other ones are more focused around the idea of what is making good quality music. So looking for composers that understand the idiosyncrasy of instruments. How many clarinet players have we got here? Yeah, we've got some. That's sweet. So clarinet, people who aren't clarinetists, the big thing to always look at is look throughout the entire line of a clarinet score, check for range, and check for what a composer is doing around the break. Okay, simple. If a composer isn't experienced, good band music is typically written with that in mind, trying to avoid a clarinet line that goes up and down over the break too much. Tuba, for example, your bottom end, making sure that for the lower the grade the band music is, the tuba parts aren't too low. Horns and trumpets, making sure the parts aren't too high and aren't too dexterous, so not too many leaps. Really simple things that you can do in looking at scores to understand if the music is well composed and going to be appropriate for your group. Exactly the same with complexities of articulation, consistency of musical idea, right? These are not things that make good music in inverted commas. These are the things that make really, really good quality educational music. You don't need to shift back to looking to a grade table to look for really specific bolted down criteria to make music work for your band. What you need to do is have a rough awareness of these categories. But does this make a piece more musical? It might make it a great educational tool. It might make it easy to make your band sound good, but I'm not overly convinced that it will make it more musical. What it will do is it will make your a good teaching tool for your band. And what we're trying to do in looking at all these different aspects that can be included in a musical score is pare it down to these 4 points. When you're looking at a piece, is there meaningful differentiation? I.e., is there something, click, space, manageable for everyone? When you look at that particular score relating to your band, are there good players in your band who are perhaps going to be bored if you don't give them enough to do? Or are there less advanced players in your band on more complex starting instruments like double reeds, right, for example, that are going to be pushed too hard by what you're seeing on the score? Music that gradually introduces and develops theoretical aspects. So working through series of keys, working through ideas of orchestration and scoring, introducing students to elements of music theory. Something that I think is done really well in the American system of music education, something that teaches specific individual instrumental techniques and something that is cumulative through the grades 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And something that critically introduces and develops specific ensemble performance considerations. So again, not just teaching your kids to be great on their single instrument, but teaching them there's an awareness of something around them and where they fit in that awareness musically. So those are the things that for me make a piece a good piece, in inverted commas, a good educational tool. But we still haven't addressed and still haven't thought about the idea of can this be art? And I suppose to think about that, we should look into like some definitions of what art music actually is. These are 2 definitions that I just plucked out while I was in marching band today, believe it or not, because I realized I didn't define it from anywhere else. Webster's definition of this is completely rubbish and the most short, just nonchalant music composed by a trained musician. Well, that to me doesn't represent art music very well. And the Collins English Dictionary, which is the one that we're brought up with in the UK, does this overly populated explanation, which tells us again, it's perhaps something that's traditional and historic, or perhaps again, something that's written by or for professional musicians. Again, that's something that I kind of disagree with in our band context. Art music for me is music that either represents something and therefore music that makes you feel something. Okay, and that's the way for me that we can make the most meaningful connection with our students and get our students to meaningfully connect with the world around them. How can music represent things? Well, we have symbolism, of course, and we have narrative, musical or extra musical. And in terms of music making you feel something, the idea that I have as a composer anyway is I do not want to particularly thrust my opinion and my idea on listeners, but I want to write in a way that makes people think about something that they're going through themselves or solicits some kind of emotional response. Now, that can be a story that we're telling about cultural identity. It can be something that we're telling about current affairs. It can be, particularly now, some kind of socio-political concept or concern, or it can just be that the nature of the piece is, in its titling and its sound world, is open and inclusive enough to encourage people to think about themselves and beyond themselves. Let me have a look at the whole thing. How many people were in Wind Ensemble today when we read through when we played the piece of mine? Just a couple of people, right? Well, I'll give you, yeah, Maddie, you missed Wind Ensemble today. You suck. So Bethany Edmondson, who you may remember from last year, has come back to do her doctoral lecture recital this week. And her recital is all about music for small band. I wrote a piece which is called Belonging. Now, I'm sure you'll agree, like we talked about the Steven Reinecker piece earlier, it's a title that's evocative. It's a title that can really mean anything, and that's on purpose. Now, I know where I was when I wrote that piece. I know exactly the mood that I was in. I just moved to the US. I'd moved in with my girlfriend at the time in an apartment in Brooklyn, and the world was absolutely my oyster. I felt emotionally centered, and I felt that although I had left my country, I'd found a place to be. And that's what that piece was about to me. And that's what it sounds like. And there are musical reasons why it sounds like that. And we'll go into those shortly. That's the kind of repertoire that I'm going to try and encourage that we think about and listen to. So, keeping this in mind, can you open that file that I sent you earlier in the chat? It's a score for a piece of music by a composer called Pete Meekin. Hopefully, I'll give you a couple of minutes to a couple of seconds rather to open that file up. Now, much like my piece Belonging, all of Pete's music, Pete, like me, is British, and Pete feels a deep connection to the world around him. He feels like, as a composer, his ethos is that he has to represent the world in its nowness, in an effort to build bridges between people, and also to provide a historical record for people who come in the future of what it's like living in our time. My ethos isn't quite like that, but I absolutely respect that ethos. I think it's important. And his piece, Closer to the Sun, I think encapsulates really nicely and neatly this idea of art music for young band being something that exists. So not only does this piece of Pete's really conform to the page that I showed you earlier, where it has positive scoring, it has positive decisions on his part that make it a piece that's going to allow you to teach. It also has this extra, more human element. That means we're going to be able to teach our kids something beyond just playing instruments. So if you look at this little title that I'm sharing with you now, this little snippet from his program notes, this is the one that the section of the piece that really speaks to me. We are all different. We are all unique. Maybe the only thing that is truly unifying about any of us is that we're all a little broken. There's no real normal, and that we'll never be perfect. And this is the lesson that Pete is trying to apply. Look at the grade it's written for. Grade 2.5. So I think really nicely pitched at that lower high school level, maybe even upper middle school level, or maybe rural high school. That's something that we haven't even talked about, and something that maybe is a whole topic of conversation for another day. Your band in the center of Kansas City will look very, very different in terms of its size, in terms of its ability level, and in terms of its social context to a band from a town in rural Kansas. Everybody is different, but I think pitching this particular artistic theme at people of that age is a really strong choice of lesson to make. Now, what he does is try to get his point across not only by providing an accurate program note that a teacher or a conductor or a composer will read and tell the class, he also constructs the music in a way so that it's symbolic and emphasizes and underlines these points altogether. And if you have a little look at the very first page of it and the first two pages of this score, I've just highlighted a couple of moments where he shows this really, really clearly. So he says in his own words, and I know this because I rang him today to ask him about it, um, that the way he's trying to get this idea across of a there being acceptance of our imperfections is by pitting things in music that we know as absolute against things in music that we know are not absolute. So if you look in the percussion section with the piano, he's scoring all these perfect fifths. The after the octave, the most positive, affirming interval, either melodically or in terms of harmony, right? But he's doing it in this way that where it's set creates something that's a little bit unsure. So the musical result of where he's scoring this in the tune percussion and the piano is that the pitch between the piano and tune percussion is always going to be slightly out of tune. Okay, tune percussion instruments exist as they exist. Unless we want to turn up with a hacksaw and start cutting pieces of them off, we can't get them flatter, and it's very difficult to make them sharper again after that. And pianos, who knows what's going on with pianos? Some of them have been sitting in band rooms for absolutely ages. Some of them are newly tuned, but there's never that definitive A equals 440 connection between tune percussion and piano. And he uses that as a musical tool to symbolize an understanding that there is no real such thing as perfection in life, nor perfection in music. If you look at the chords that are starting in bar 5, I think I've given them a little highlight for you on the score. Again, he's chosen to voice his chords in a way, in a linear way rather than a vertically voiced way, that they grow. They grow, they go up or out in pitch, and pairs of 2 chords eventually become 3. The new phrase becomes 4, and eventually in the phrase that follows, I think on about page 2 or 3 or 4, it grows into a whole phrase. And that's supposed to be something that's symbolic of growing complications in life. And if you look at letter C, the way he eventually puts these chords together as a whole band, brass, wind, and percussion, as one homogeneous unit, and then separates them out into different units where he's going from complex harmonic ideas, complex scoring ideas, back to really independent section-led ideas. This is supposed to be symbolic of the fact that sometimes we all stray away from our intended path. So there's this extra layer to the music that we can use to teach our kids. Not only do they hear a piece that they're hopefully going to like, not only are they getting a piece that's going to develop them as players, they also get to engage with this extra musical narrative, which shows them that there's something bigger than themselves and even bigger than music in the world. From an education standpoint, another thing that I'd love you to check out on the first page, I've noted this in red here. This is an amazing tool that the composers frequently use and something that it's really useful for you to look out for. And it's what makes this piece work as a grade 2.5, because it is quite exposed and built around open sonority. It's not your typical low grade music. Look at the flute part, look at the clarinet part at the top. There's always that doubling of the top line. Look between the bass clarinet and the bassoon, doubling of the bottom line. Look in the percussion part, which is vast: piano, glockenspiel, vibraphone, tubular bells. Look at all the repeated pitches. You could make this piece work and have it work really, really well, even if you didn't have a piano player, even if you didn't have a tuned percussion player. The spirit of the music, the color of the music would still be very similar, if not the same. And that's the hallmark of not necessarily a great piece of art, but a great piece of composition for low-level bands. If you have a little look at page 2, on my computer, that's for me rather than for you. Again, in the highlighted sections, you can see that doubling again all over the shop in oboe, flute, and clarinet. But you'll also look in the last bar of that page, a little asterisk, where he finds the idea of doubling something impossible to do because of the color that he wants. He provides an alternate cue, okay, and he provides it in alto saxophone. So now, all of a sudden, if you don't have a clarinet that can play that high, perhaps, or if you don't have maybe like any more than 1 or 2 clarinets in your band, you have the option of adding an alto saxophone part, as well as just having that low trumpet part in to cover that particularly really important part of the melody. And he does that a lot. And there are many composers that do that. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Look in your scores for doubling and look in your scores for cues. The composers that use their cues not just as a means of showing players where they are, but as a means of giving you, and as an educator, a tool to make a piece work for your band is really, really useful. So I figured one thing that we could do is have a listen to this piece, first of all, and you can experience um, a low grade piece that isn't your typical band music. It's real, genuine art music with a purpose that's ingrained in the musical decision making that you can use to teach. And this is Closer to the Sun by Pete Meekin. Give me a nod or a thing in the chat if this isn't coming out well on your speakers. There we go. And we can stop it there for now. Now that you've had the story behind that piece told to you beforehand, do you think that it sounds like the story to you? Honestly. Talking to you, Kelly Bushhouse. Yes or no?
Yes.
What is it about it? Without going into like music theory, without analyzing the intervals like I did.
It it's hard to describe it. It feels, it has like a very like sentimental value to it, and like a depth in the feeling that it evokes in you. I can't really describe it with words.
Not only is that like a hallmark of Pete's music, but I'm so glad that you used the words depth of feeling, because that's something that I was coming to. Music like this exists in more places than you think it exists for band. When you will go to, and again, this is just opinion, when you will go to the places you will go to find the music for your bands, when you come to buy them for when you teach, you will look at J.W. Pepper, you will look at Hal Leonard, and you will look at the music that comes after beginning band books, and you will see, like I said earlier, a bazillion pieces that are overtures, toccatas, Eagle, Mountain, overture, blah, 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 stuff with all these arbitrary names. And you will also see, like we talked about earlier, pieces with a lot of evocative names. But the thing about this idea of music publishing now being this open thing that people can do themselves in the 21st century and not needing gatekeepers like publishers to print is that your job as band directors has just become a lot harder, because it's your responsibility to go and find the music that exists. That's part of the job that I actually really, really love. And yeah, the CDs that you will get sent in their droves and the mailing lists that you will be put on don't all the time contain this music. But there are places that you can go to find this music. And this is just a list of a couple of resources that you may find really, really useful as a starting point. First of all, I would say that there is really no substitute for your own personal research. And right now, that means I can see people are taking photos. So I'll put that there. Take photos of stuff. 3, 2, 1. Photos done. Awesome. Um, so right now, there's no better place for this than social media. Every composer who is writing and self-publishing is on Instagram particularly and on Facebook through either their personal or professional pages, constantly posting new videos of their newest work. It's the most popular place. It's where I find a lot of my repertoire choices. But there are more formal places that you can look to too. One of the most interesting right now is the Creative Repertoire Initiative, and the site there is creativerepertoire.com. They are like a think tank of composers who've come together to do two things. Just this that we're talking about now, this idea of infiltrating meaningful art music into our band music canon of repertoire, and also creating versions of that art music, which is originally scored for full band, into flexible ensembles. That's kind of what Bethany's project is about that we're doing right now. And you'll find the coolest thing about CRI is their Facebook group. It's or Facebook. I think it's a Facebook page or group. It might be a group actually, because everybody can interact with it. I'd recommend you going and finding that now, because although it's really high level composers like Eric Whittaker, Pete is one of them. Eric Whittaker, Pete, John Mackey, Omar Thomas, Jennifer Jolly, Frank Tekeli, and maybe Michael Doherty as well. These are, you know, the doyens of our movement right now. They are all creating versions of their pieces that can be played by as few as 5 people in a room, but still carry this extra message of meaning. So I would check out their Facebook page. Similarly, the Blue Dot Collective is a collective of composers who are, you know, our youngest and brightest composers right now, I guess. They're all kind of like about 4 or 5 years older than me, so they're in their mid to late 30s. And in particular, for young band music, I would start to check out David Biedenbender. He's a wonderful composer. And Omar Thomas and Viet Quang are 2 composers that I think at the moment are dealing with really interesting subjects. Viet writes a lot of music which is based around renewable energy. And that's a fantastic lesson to be bringing to our students right now. And Omar Thomas, we played one of his pieces with Simband last semester. I want to say it was Mother of a Revolution. And then we'll be playing another one of his pieces with Wind Ensemble, and that's going to be Of Our New Day Begun, that piece is. And Omar really addresses topics of social justice in his music, and he does it in a very sincere and very clear and honest way, which is something I really enjoy. Your stock page that you go to find out everything about every piece that you ever want to play in Wimband ever, forevermore, when it was played, how many people have played it, is windrep.org. And I know that's not something that's mentioned very much in music ed classes, but that's a fantastic resource for you to use. And it will contain lots of this kind of music too. And I'd really encourage you to look at the self-published composers that I've mentioned in the self-published list at the bottom. Pete Meekin, Michael Markowski, who is a Brooklyn-based composer. Jake Runstad, if you're a choral person here, his choral music is amazing. It's Grammy nominated. Brian Balmagus, if you're a string person here, Brian is everywhere. When I judge high school, you know, the kind of like events they have in theme parks at summer, your high school band goes and plays, and then you go and mess around in the theme park for ages. I'm not kidding you. There is a piece of Brian Balmagus on every single program. And there's a reason for it. It's really, really well written music, well considered music. And he writes a lot of music for low grade string orchestra too. And Alex Shapiro, who's a former film composer who now writes for band. Yeah, and that's the information that I kind of have to bring to you. Before we stop for questions, I figure, if there are any, that is, I figure I can give you a little bit of an Easter egg, and I would be hypocritical if I didn't show you how I like to place these thoughts in the music that I write. And I'll share with you now a little preview for those of you who are wind ensemble pieces of the piece of mine that we're going to premiere in a few weeks' time. I've only written 2 movements of it yet, so I need to get my ass in gear. But this is the first music, and the premise of this music, the idea of this piece is Well, first of all, it's been commissioned by a consortium of 20 bands, all of which are high school bands or collegiate bands that are connected to KU. They're all Dr. Popiel's former students. So um, this is rather, and this is my musical outlook, it's rather about socio-political concerns. It's more about understanding where we come from. So I'm trying to, within this 4-movement suite, paint pictures of different aspects of life in Kansas as I've come to encounter it this year. So this first movement is supposed to be plains and prairies. And I do that in a couple of ways, but the most noted way, the thing that I'm trying to do the most often, is tap into a specific melody. That melody is Home on the Range. You don't really ever hear it in its entirety until the end, but what you'll hear is little kinds of intervals that are used. The harmony is all constructed out of intervals in the first, and the way that the phrase is kind of structured is about always giving you almost enough and then having it taken away. And that's my little way of kind of saying how much I miss home, how I love being here, but there's also this little shade of me that exists somewhere else. Whoever spots the reference to James Barnes and can tell me what bar it is in gets a beer bought by me when they're 21. Hopefully you'll hear this okay. So the idea behind that piece is that even if you were in a small town band that didn't have 2 saxophones, that didn't have bassoons, didn't have oboes, like we said earlier, there's always a double, there's always a cue, there's always some way that it's able to be performed. And that's probably, in terms of the difference between pieces that I think are well composed and poorly composed, the one nugget that I would leave you when you go to look at scores for the bands that you're going to conduct is look for those doubles, look for those alternates. And then in terms of, art music, at least on one piece on your program, if you want to play great composed music that perhaps doesn't have that message, To Kelly's Simple Gifts, I think, is one of those wonderful pieces that doesn't necessarily have an artistic message behind it. It's just a great piece. Yeah, they're fantastic and you should program them. But particularly in the world that we're in now, when you get to play a piece that shows people where they come from, shows people where they could go, shines a light on issues of justice and inequality, and encourages people to not only think within themselves, but look away from themselves. I absolutely think that you should, and I hope that you do. And I hope that you now have an awareness of how to do it and the place that you can go to So look for that music. Cool. Try and keep it together, Mads. Does anybody have any questions?
I've got one for you.
Uh-oh.
So
This is being recorded.
what are some composers that aren't maybe like well known right now that you really like and that you would recommend us listen to or like
Band-
play their music?
Band composers specifically?
Well, really anything, because you were talking a lot about the like racial issues, and so like I was thinking like maybe people of color or people of minorities whose music maybe doesn't get recognized as much.
Absolutely. Well, that's something that I love about the Blue Dot Collective and the list that I gave you earlier, and something about the self-published list. I'm just going to bring it back up for anybody who wants to snap a photo of it. So just from this list here, as we're looking at it, Jen Jolly is a female who presents as Korean. David Biedenbender is Jewish. Alex Shapiro is female. Omar Thomas is black. Viet Quang is Vietnamese. And there are all of those national flavors that are present in their music. Some people that I haven't put on the list, Kevin Day is kind of a young rising star who is a grad assistant at the University of Georgia, I want to say at the moment. Whilst he's a young black composer, his music isn't particularly infused with elements of his heritage. He writes good music, and he writes really, really attractive music. So I'd absolutely consider him as somebody that you should check out. Yeah, those are my people really that I would recommend you to. I come back to Pete because although Pete is kind of in this gap between being of the old, what is the old guard now, your Stephen Bryant's, Frank Kelly's, Eric Whitaker's, and then you've got people who've come around slightly after him, Omar and Viet. Although Pete is also a white male, I think we shouldn't only be looking at how diverse the people that compose the music are. We should be looking at the message that is contained in people's music. And although Pete is a white male, he has this natural ability to be in touch with world issues and this really simple and succinct way of capturing it in a moment that's a piece of music. So Pete Meekin would be at the top of my list of people that you should listen to. And if you wanted to listen to pieces of his that are short and potentially appropriate for grade 2, 3, Let This Place is a wonderful piece to check out. If you wanted to listen to a piece of his that's bigger, his first symphony, the Corn Symphony, is wonderful, and that tells the story of the rebuilding of the city of Coventry after the cathedral and the whole area was bombed at the end of World War II. That's a really interesting piece to listen to. Yeah, and like I said, the hottest guy around right now is Omar, and that's particularly the case because of the kind of music that is built around his background in education. He's a jazz guy. He's just come to sort of win band over the past, I want to say 5 to 10 years, but he's been a prolific sort of big band arranger before that. He's had his own big band album that's been nominated for Grammys, and he kind of somehow finds a way of making a win band sound like a big band. And if you listen to a piece of his called Come Sunday, that we were going to do with Wind Ensemble, but we're now not, that's a really good piece to listen to, which also has that inbuilt wider socio-political concern. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Sweet. What are we seeing in the chat here? Choral composers. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big choral guy, but so I don't know. What I can't talk about is the kind of repertoire that represents this idea of a wider social or artistic concept. But what I can tell you is on my list, Jake Runestad is a wonderful composer, and Mike Markowski is just writing his first choral music now. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Oh, and also just keep an eye out for music that's written for choir and band. When you go to your jobs, there's actually 2 or 3 pieces. Again, I keep coming back to Pete, and I'll see if I can remember the name. Maybe I'll have to say it to Will. But yeah, he's written a piece for grade 3 musicians for choir and band based on the idea of your choir and your band are rehearsing in the same building, sometimes at similar times. bring them together and address the same artistic issues together. That's something definitely worth looking for. Yeah, Lightspeed by Kevin Day. That's a cool new piece. That's really cool. Cool. Any more questions? Amazing. I'm glad we kept it to under an hour. I usually get criticized for prattling on for like 2 hours at seminar. So big fan of this.
I'm really looking forward to seeing your piece actually premiered.
I'm really looking forward to having the time to finish it.
As I really wish I was in Wind Ensemble because I when you were just playing it before. Really
I wish we were all in Wind Ensemble. Wind Ensemble is lovely, but I love Simband too, and I love concert brass. Love it all.
Orchestra.
I don't love orchestra, Will. It's important that you know that. I like band, Will. Sorry, string people. Sorry, string people. Sorry.
I think it's just me and Danny
Danny,
and Diana.
Cool. This is the bit where you take over, Will. This is your thing.
I'm gonna reclaim the host now because that was my only thing. If you have anything else, Tom, or
No, thank you for listening. I hope it was useful. And yeah, I hate these things that are like just people telling anecdotal stories about themselves. So I hope it was a meaningful and useful thing for you to check out.
I enjoyed this. So, all right. With that, I think that's everything then. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for presenting.
Goodbye forever.
See you tomorrow, Tom. And with that being said, that's all I got. So, all right, you're free to go. Maddie, if you could stick around for just a second.
I have a question before I go.
Ooh,
Yes.
I've been
Guys in
kind of a really
trouble.
bad NAFME member, and I haven't been coming to everything. And I haven't like paid the money you're supposed to pay.
Oh,
be a
I meant to
part of
mention
NAFME.
dues. Poop. I meant to mention dues.
Am I supposed to do that? I need to do that. And what's the best way that I can so that you know that I'm a part of this group and I can for sure be a part of this group and not be like left out?
Okay.
Because I forgot.
So what you're gonna do is I'm gonna send this all out in an email because I completely forgot to mention dues this morning or during this meeting.
Yeah.
So many things I had on the thing. All right, whatever. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna Venmo. You can Venmo or pay in cash to Tracy. I don't know if you know who Tracy is.
Yeah, I'm in Sax Studio with her.
Okay, so you're going to go to Tracy when you have Sax Studio and
Yeah.
tell her that you need the chapter Venmo for NAFME. I believe it is KU NAFME C-JMD. Yeah,
Okay.
correct me if I'm wrong, Maddie.
I'm actually not positive either. It's in an email.
It's in an
Sure.
email.
Yeah.
They're
I'll
always in
find it.
emails. You're gonna Venmo since it's before the 16th. If you Venmo her prior to the 16th, it is only $20. It is $25 starting on the 17th. We also are having mocktail night is going to be on the 16th.
Okay.
It's a little way of me being like, hey, remember
Do
that dues
it.
are also due on that day because now I
Yeah.
can be like, hey, you're here.
Yeah.
So there's that way, or you could just pay her $20 in cash and just have her write it down that you
Sure.
have. So that's
Cool. All right. Thank you.
And then there's also, well, hold on. There's also national dues if you want to attend KMEA, but that can be pushed off till
Sounds
whenever
good.
you want.
Cool.
So thank you, Elias.
Yeah. No, thanks, guys.
All right, I'm going to stop recording now.